And at number 10, in-universe games. The knowledge that Scott Cawthon's in-universe counterpart has made games about the Fazbear restaurants in the FNAF universe has been driving us, or more particularly me, crazy ever since we learned about it in Help Wanted. Literally Help Wanted's opening scene. What games are the ones he made? Were they the original FNAF games? Does anything we've done up until this point in the games actually matter? Well, it seems like Security Breach might have actually at least kind of explained it with a single machine known as Mangle's Quest, which, if you don't remember, is one of the mini games that you had to play in order to unlock the good ending of FNAF 3 and the Happiest Day minigame. I guess technically though that has even more implications. If to release the souls of children we had to actually like glitch out an actual game, but that's a discussion for another day. I'm not talking about that now. And at 9, toy animatronics. Has Security Breach actually wrapped up the story of the toy animatronics? It's possible. I mean, this idea has been out there for a while, really ever since Glamrock Chica was revealed. But could the toy animatronics actually have been reused or repurposed into the Glamrock animatronics, or at least parts of them being used? And actually it would make sense, considering how these animatronics seem to also have like a security database. Oh my god, wait, no, they actually do have a security database. Freddy straight up pulls Gregory out of his stomach and then like looks at him and says, I cannot locate you. There's no profile for you. So yeah, they have a security database. They don't like seem to have one, they actually have one. Just like the toys from FNAF 2. They would scan a criminal database to see if anyone was willing to commit murders. But with facial recognition and conveniently the same glitches that allowed them to misidentify William, allowing them to not identify Vanny, since Freddy is unable to see Vanny without Roxy's eyes. Which begs the question, could the other animatronics see her? Or like, is it just Roxy? And if the last versions of the toy animatronics were so terrible at their job, because I mean like at this point, they know they were. And I guess like maybe they were like, oh yeah, no, it's because William programmed them, so that's why they were terrible. But like still, why would you reuse that? Why would you risk it again? That seems like a absolutely abysmal idea. And at 8, alligator mask. Now my original idea was that the man in room 1280 took place after FNAF 6's fire, and that's how William became Glitch Trap. However, it's seeming more and more that the man in room 1280 actually takes place after Security Breach. After all, I mean, like, it would explain why the one you should not have killed is wearing an alligator mask, since it would be Monty if this does take place after, since there wasn't really an alligator animatronic beforehand, and there's no way that an alligator mask is Happy Frog, okay? Just saying. And considering how Freddy runs off with Gregory at the end of the game, Monty would be left to run the show. I mean, we actually like see this happen in a newspaper article at the end of the good ending. The one where you go through the loading dock that required level 7 clearance, and you just like, Gregory somehow drives a van with Freddy and then uses the battery to jumpstart Freddy. Yeah, that ending, we see that since Freddy's gone, Monty ends up running the show. And Vanessa even uses this as a threat to try to convince Freddy to give us up when he's in parts in service. You know, when his like head is disconnected and we have to reconnect it. So a kid wearing a Monty mask after the canon ending of Security Breach would explain a lot. It would make a lot of sense. It would also explain the reason why Afton's body isn't burnt horrifically like it's supposed to be in the Man in Room 1280 in FNAF 9, because like that he hasn't done that yet. I mean, it also explains why he's called Burntrap. At least we know he didn't escape the FNAF 6 pizzeria like everyone thought he had though. Right? And at 6, brothers. Now this is something that Matt had actually talked about in his recent FNAF Theory video that went out on January 1st, 2022. However, this is something I have been calling for ages. Ever since we learned Gregory's name, ever since that Funko statue was leaked, I have been saying that their relationship is very brotherly. It was awfully similar to Michael and the crying child. especially when the older brother is represented by, or maybe even now possessing, the glam rock Freddy animatronic, when it was a version of a Freddy animatronic that killed his little brother in the first place. And before you get all mad at me saying, oh no, that was Fredbear. Fredbear is a version of Freddy, okay? Go away. Fredbear is literally a version of Freddy. Back off. The fact that this is so solid after the game comes out, it kind of explains that what happened actually did happen. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. And that now we're trying to make up for it, to reconcile. And if Gregory ends up actually being a robot crying child, you all owe me a coffee. Because I've been calling that one for ages too. I have been saying that for so long and so many people got mad at me. But look at this, MatPat says it and I saw no hate comments on the top, at the top comments, okay, on that video. I saw no hate.
And at 5, first animatronics. Some of the first animatronics built by William Afton featured claw mechanisms that were able to hide away items inside them. This is one of the best Faz facts we got, because thanks to this line, we know that William intended on killing even before acquiring Fredbear's family diner, since that was the first location. And the only animatronics we see have a claw mechanism are the ones from sister location. Baby is the only one we actually see use the claw, but with containment chambers being present, we can assume the other fun times have them as well. Which means the fun times were made before they opened the first Freddy Fazbear's location. Hence why William was able to open Circus Baby's so quickly when he learned that Fazbear's was going to close. Which means if not for Baby's line of being on stage for one day, we wouldn't really know when sister location takes place. Or at least we would have to question it.
And at 4, Princess Quest. The inclusion of Princess Quest in the Help Wanted mobile port is a pretty little minigame added since they couldn't really include the full glitch trap and 16 tapes thing in a phone game. So they added Princess Quest's 16 braziers, and then they all came together to form a form of glitch trap at the end. This seemed like a simple way to include everything when it first came out, but now we have a whole new lease on this idea. Since, with Security Breach, the way to get the best ending, even though it's not canon, is through these Princess Quest arcade machines. But they've been ported from a mobile game into arcade cabinets. We learn this in one of the various lore duffel bags that we can find throughout the game. One in Bonnie Bowl says that they ported Princess Quest 1 from an old mobile game. Why port to arcade? It's a very good question, but these Princess Quest games are really what's holding Vanessa back from reclaiming her body, which we see happen in the best ending, hence why it's the best ending.
Getting close to the end, in number 3, Psychopath. There are hundreds of possible reasons for why William Afton started killing. None of them really justify a killing spree, obviously, and a lot of them have to do with him losing his family, but there's also just the classic reason that there is no reason, and that William is just your typical run-of-the-mill psychopath and has no remorse for any of his actions. Now, the vengeful spirit referred to as the one you should not have killed seems to prevent this theory from being true, since if he had no remorse, nobody would really be considered the one that he shouldn't have killed. But remember, they named themselves. William didn't really name them because the manifestations in his head in FNAF Ultimate Custom Night were made by the vengeful spirit who wanted him to suffer. So William might not have considered them someone they shouldn't have killed, whether it be Cassidy or Crying Child, but they considered it themselves. It's entirely plausible that William has no regrets for any of his actions, hence why he continued his killing spree after he lost 2 out of his 3 children to it. I mean, he even sent Michael down to see his sister possessing a robot, who then also tried to kill him. So I think it's safe to say he probably doesn't really care about losing people that he should love, okay? He probably only had kids to actually seem normal, like those who are considered psychopaths or more commonly sociopaths try to fit in by having kids. Maybe he was doing that.
And ultimately, in at number 2, the Blob. Okay, so what I'm talking about here, as opposed to the FNAF 6 ending, which I mentioned before, is not what the Blob is meant to do, but something else entirely. Here, I'm explaining that the Blob in this game actually explains the blob of tentacle goo that comprises Baby, introduced in the final few Fazbear Frights books. This blob actually explains why that whole thing was introduced and explored and why it happened. Because it's setting up yet another antagonist for the future of the FNAF games. As long as the next owner of the IP wants to go in that direction, that is, because now they got 3. They can go with William, they can go with Vanny, or they can go with the Blob, or hell, they can go backwards and make an entirely new character for all we know. And even if they don't want to go that way, they can wrap up William's story first and then move on to someone else. Like, I mean, Scott and Steel Wool did leave a death animation for William unused in the files, and I doubt that it's going to be used for a potential DLC, because first we need a few updates for the game. But there's no way that they wouldn't capitalize on an obscure ending like that for another game, because like there's no way that they would officially kill William off. I want it to happen, but it's not gonna happen. I wouldn't be surprised if Scott's like been working with the person taking over for the endings of this game to see which one fits where they want to go next the best. Hence why there are so many endings. Scott was like, okay, pick one. Actually, no, I doubt that. I feel like Scott was like, this is the true ending. You gotta work with this. But here are other ones to help guide you. And finally, into number 1, the Help Wanted ending. Now, while the whole glitch trap shouldn't be possible thing is a whole other can of worms that I'm not going to explore, I think that Security Breach, and more so the Princess Quest ending, perfectly explains the Help Wanted ending. You need to beat the first game, then you beat the second game, and then you choose the Vanny ending, and instead of pushing the button to disassemble Vanny, you play the third Princess Quest game. This will result in the player actually saving Vanessa as long as you beat the third one, and then finding Vanny's mask on the floor. But how did that really save Vanessa, you ask? Well, actually, it's fairly simple. Help Wanted. If you've seen any of my videos where I discuss the endings of Help Wanted and how when we complete that puzzle in the final battle we get locked behind a door, you'll know that I said that that's us being distracted so that William has an opportunity to actually shut us away in our own mind. So if we do the thing that we do to actually beat him when he's attacking us, we're just distracted enough so that he wins even more. And that he does. But this Princess Quest ending actually really proves me right. Since the end of Princess Quest 3, you open a giant door with a large keyhole surrounded by glitching cracks and purple stuff. And in Help Wanted, we get sealed behind a giant door with a large keyhole with cracks around it and even handprints on the inside. This with the obvious connection via Princess Quest to Help Wanted, because you know Princess Quest was the mobile version of the 16 tapes. This is us releasing the player from Help Wanted, who consequentially ends up being Vanessa from the wall that Afton set up, since after this door closes we see her mask on the floor, and even sit on a hill with Vanessa and Freddy's head, which is a whole other can of worms, which makes MatPat think that Gregory is crying child, Freddy is Mike, and that Vanessa is Elizabeth Afton, which we've been calling for months. I feel like we've been calling that for a year, but. And at 7, Ultimate Custom Night. Ultimate Custom Night was actually a pretty dividing point among FNAF fans and theorists alike. Some thought that it was Afton in hell, others thought that it was a coma, but we now have a definitive answer. Assuming it does take place between Security Breach and FNAF 6, as the release of the games would indicate, it would actually mean that Ultimate Custom Night is what Burntrap is seeing while unconscious in the recharge station. Perhaps it's him keeping himself from dying in the recharge station, like a mind kind of fight thing, like whenever a main character dies in a show and they have to fight back to get to their body. Yeah, that kind of thing. And we don't actually see him wake up until he beats 50-20 mode, and then he comes after us like we see in the true ending to the game. So basically, we get down there, and as soon as we activate it, he beats 50-20 mode. This actually makes sense given that Scrap Trap is in Ultimate Custom Night, since this would sort of be like a nightmare sequence with Scrap Trap serving as what William is dealing with in these moments, or I guess his misdeeds, or his wickedness made of flesh, as Nightmare puts it. But you know, the whole aftermath of the FNAF 6 fire, and then returning to that Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, either because of like Charlotte being there and he wanted to kill her, or maybe just some other thing that Henry had to do to actually lure Afton back. We don't actually know what that was, but either way, he had to deal with it and it makes sense as to why now.
Halfway through into number 5, Henry Emily. Now, this is certainly an interesting idea because seemingly Henry has died in multiple ways across FNAF canons, with his first apparent death being in the FNAF world at the hands of Baby. His death in the novel seems to have happened before the Silver Eye starts, and then he dies in FNAF 6 along with everyone else. But could one of these deaths involve a springlock failure, or maybe just have something to do with springlocks? Maybe Afton offed Henry in one of these realities himself, or maybe Baby has some form of springlock mechanisms inside of her, and then when she killed Henry, she used those. I mean, hell, maybe Henry just climbed into the wrong suit at the wrong time. It's a question that we don't really pay attention to because, well, Henry's death doesn't really mean much to the story, unfortunately, but it's still true. Henry dying doesn't really do much overall in the FNAF lore. We didn't even really know that he was alive until FNAF 6, for God's sakes. So yeah, maybe for irony's sake, Scott had him bite the dust in a quicker way rather than just being burnt alive. Or maybe it just that Baby killed him, because I mean, Baby was in the FNAF 6 location too, so maybe it was Baby. And at 4, We Are Vanny. This one was a video a long time ago, before Security Breach actually came out, and it was a theory about how our player character in FNAF VR was in fact Vanny, or Vanessa. And you know what? It ended up being confirmed as true in Security Breach, although I'm pretty sure that that wasn't an original thought when we made that video. I'm pretty sure I based it off of Reddit posts and stuff. But with the interviews or therapy sessions present within the game, however, we do get more information and clues to the story of the previous 3 FNAF games as well. Well, okay, like 2 main series games and then 1 spin-off. Yep. That's correct. These therapy sessions actually confirmed the suspicions that Vanessa was indeed Ness from FNAF AR as well. So with this revelation, we know that in FNAF VR we play as Vanessa, who was probably put there by someone higher up at Fazbear Entertainment because they knew what Afton was planning or something, or maybe it was Afton using his hacking skills through being in the game, something like that. I don't know. But then we got possessed with our mind locked inside Princess Quest. And then we get sent to the special delivery unit to install our virus on various animatronics, probably to try to help William gain a body of his own, but that didn't work. So we were moved to the head security guard for the Pizzaplex, where we could dig up Afton's old body so that we'd be able to put him in that, since it had already contained him before. And thanks to the simple mention of Lewis and her looking up odd things at work with her secret encrypted conversations, we now know the full story of Vanessa since FNAF VR, or since FNAF AR. No, it would be VR AR Security Breach. Getting close to the end into number 3, location confirmed. Despite the name, hurricanes are actually not the leading cause of death of children in Hurricane, Utah. This is a more specific confirmation of the location that the game takes place in, since Utah was the state that things had been narrowed down to thanks to the pay stubs we get in the games, but this just places it in Hurricane, Utah. Now, I don't think that there's much else to be learned from this. I don't think that like Scott pulled like a Gravity Falls with a real scavenger hunt that was planned or that was started in Hurricane, but I can't really rule it out because at this point we've jumped through hoops more than starving dolphins at SeaWorld to get lore, so a real life issue, or like a real life scavenger hunt like this, would probably be in the cards, at least if Scott hadn't announced his retirement. But I think that since these fast facts were found in the game files and were unused, that means if there was an ARG or scavenger hunt planned, it's no longer in the works. Who knows though, maybe you'll find like a woodland Freddy statue or something out in the woods. At least if it was started. Are there woods in Utah? I don't know. Can we get the king of random on this? Just go out looking. I'll join. But ultimately, into number 2, Vengeful Child. And while yes, we made a whole video about this literally yesterday, I wanted to make sure that everyone knows that the whole crying child is the vengeful spirit thing solves a lot more problems than it causes. Because the only thing you really have to do to have this theory be the case is believe that crying child would blame his father for his death. And considering how he most likely saw Elizabeth get scooped, it's probably the case. At that point, he would note that the robots that William, his father, made are meant to kill, and therefore wouldn't blame Michael for figuring that an animatronic wouldn't be able to kill him. Additionally, it explains the Nightmares in Ultimate Custom Night, fact that Cassidy was released in FNAF 3, and the he pronouns used for the one you should not have killed, and doesn't really raise any questions other than would he blame William. The only time we've seen someone possess something while they've still been alive and then also possessed multiple things was Henry after the loss of his daughter, which, you know what, in my mind would cause a lot more agony than a child being chased by nightmare versions of robots while you're in a coma in the hospital, okay? Losing a child is worse than a nightmare. Also, if you're in the hospital, the only thing that you're going to possess is like the only thing around, which is your dad, okay? It's the simplest explanation. It literally explains everything. I don't know why people are so apprehensive about this theory. Like, yeah, you can believe that William didn't kill Crying Child, but what's important here isn't what you believe, it's what Crying Child himself would believe. After all, since the vengeful spirit is talking through the animatronics in Ultimate Custom Night, as we learned from the mediocre melody lines, because the animatronic lines are basically just what the one you should not have killed is saying, but in the animatronic voice. So, by that logic, the one you should not have killed basically named themselves. Not basically, they did name themselves. So all that matters is if Crying Child would blame dear old dad, and considering how he probably saw Elizabeth get scooped, I'm much more comfortable thinking that, instead of thinking that Cassidy wasn't released in the Happiest Day minigame despite what is clearly is the intended end for those spirits, and then somehow switching from Golden Freddy to William or even possessing both, and then having two souls inside of Golden Freddy. Like, it's one logical assumption compared to multiple assumptions. The logbook people also cite as evidence for Cassidy actually basically proves the whole Cassidy thing wrong, since Cassidy shows up on a page talking about your happiest day, being given cake by the puppet, so I'm pretty sure that is Scott solidifying the whole she was released in the Happiest Day minigame thing, since this book would have taken place before FNAF 3. Like hell, maybe it even took place during FNAF 3 just before she's released, hence why the two spirits could be talking. And finally, in number 1, false conviction. This is actually the theory that inspired this list, and it comes from one of you. On our full timeline video, which in my opinion is still underappreciated, incredibly underappreciated really, Shauna S commented, quick little theory. You know how in the first game it says the killer was convicted for murders of the missing children? If that is the case, I think that Henry was falsely convicted, but since they couldn't find the bodies, he got 25 to 30 years and got out of prison when Fazbear Frights happened. It explains to me why he wasn't involved in the first few games. I will say I've heard a lot of different information concerning the missing children's incident, so my theory may be wrong, just wanted to put that out there. And then they also gave me permission to use this in the video. And honestly, Henry being falsely imprisoned for the missing children's incident explains a lot. Considering how there were no bodies, there wouldn't really be much forensic evidence, so the case against anyone in this case would rely on circumstantial evidence to get a conviction. But when it's the death of multiple kids, they're definitely going to want to explore every avenue and not let this guy off if there is even the slightest chance. So the case would have been dragged on for a while, until 1993 potentially, when the Fazbear Frights location closed with William still inside. 30 years is definitely a lot of time for new evidence to come to light, and maybe Henry even could have gotten out earlier than the 30 years if he was exonerated by new evidence. But he didn't act until William was free because he thought that the situation was dealt with. Well, the whole he was convicted thing could be explained away by Scott not thinking that there would be another game, let alone 8 more. He probably could have wanted the killer story to end with the first game just in case. But now, since we know that William wasn't convicted, this could be a really great explanation that explains why nothing happened with Henry until FNAF 3. So, incredible job, Shauna. Amazing work. I don't know if that means much coming from me, but good job. In at 9, springlock suits. The original animatronics featured springlock suits that had to be hand cranked to allow them to be worn safely by employees. This was something we already knew based on FNAF 3 minigames, but it's nice to get confirmation anyway. The original animatronic suits were springlock suits that could be worn by employees in suit mode or put into robot mode to allow them to perform on stage. This also confirms that the item we see in Purple Guy's hand in FNAF 2 is in fact a springlock crank like we've been assuming, although we did at first think that it was a phone. But now we have a better understanding, although this proposes another idea. If that was a springlock crank, does that mean that the animatronics Purple Guy was disassembling in those minigames were actually springlock suits? Because if that was the case, we would have a whole other reason as to how the missing children died, because that would certainly be more agonizing than like a knife through the chest or something. And it ate yummy pizza. Fazbear's Twisted Pizza recipe was voted most yummy by 6 out of 10 children in every survey from 1988 to 1993. This gives us a bit more insight into the actual locations present within the FNAF universe. The existence of a Twisted Pizza also implies that this is what the Twisted animatronics were named after, and it actually makes some form of sense, at least to my twisted brain. Since if the pizza was voted the most yummy and the animatronics were meant to show you something that you wanted to see, I guess your eyes would also consider those animatronics to be the most yummy. yummy. But this could also just be an indication as to the years the twisted animatronics were operational, since we do get the years of 1988 to 1993, which seems to line up with the events of the books and the games. Since Scott is clever in hiding Easter eggs and explanations, maybe this is what he had in mind when writing this fast fact. And at 7, imposter. Some thoroughly believe that this Burntrap animatronic, this new version of like the Spring Bonnie animatronic, to not be William Afton, and instead somehow be Henry Emily, William's business partner and the father of his first victim. Why do they think this? Personally, I have no idea. However, I can kind of see why, but it would simply be due to inconsistencies. Since seemingly the endoskeleton for this version of Springtrap also has the same endo as the Glamrock animatronics, or the ones that we see in what is honestly the scariest part of this game. Since if this was Afton after all, the endo would have had to be the first version of an endoskeleton since it's the Springtrap suit. My explanation for this is simply because they had the model for his endoskeleton in the files and then were rushed to like release something because, you know, they delayed the game multiple times already and the game wasn't even complete when it was released. So they used that one and then added like the Springtrap bits onto him. But since he's so destroyed, it's difficult to really determine whether it is the same design as Scraptrap. And since Henry was also in the FNAF 6 location, it could have been him, but honestly I doubt it, okay? The only thing that is sus about the latest FNAF game is how well everything works out for Gregory and Gregory himself, alright? Gregory is sus. It's a sussy baka. And at 6, the creator. The famous William Afton is the man responsible for the creation of the animatronics we all know and love. This is something that has actually been bugging me for a while, because while the books have William as a creator, we weren't sure if he was the creator or just a technician in the games. So with this line confirming William as a creator, we may be able to go back and fine-tune some of our speculation with this new information. Since he is a creator, he probably would be the only one who knew how to deal with these animatronics, so the possibility of another technician is now lower than it was at first. Him hiding the bodies in the suits suddenly becomes more plausible, as nobody would really understand how to open them, and the FNAF VR parts and service minigames become more telling, because while yes, they could have been made by the studio, the sheer complexity of them seems to indicate that William had a hand in instructing them on where to take the minigame. Perhaps this was truly how William had set up these animatronics to work, so nobody would be able to mess with this hiding spot. Because I mean, like, why would you press both sides of Bonnie's head? Like, why would you pull on Freddy's bow to get his chest to open? Just doesn't make sense.
Halfway through into number 5, the FNAF 6 Fire. FNAF 6 acted as the narrative ending for many animatronics. The fun times in Molten Freddy, the puppet inside of Lefty, Scrap Baby, and even us as Michael Afton. But the secret true ending to this game actually shows us the aftermath of this fire. We see the aftermath of FNAF 3's Fire and Sister Location's final cutscene, with Springtrap popping out of the ruins of Fazbear Fright, and this time around we learn about the third last game's fire in this ending. Since, as Matt Pat pointed out in his recent theory, as well as many people have pointed out in the comments of various videos and Reddit posts, the pizzeria you're in for this secret ending looks a hell of a lot like the one that we make, or like the base for the one we make in Pizzeria Simulator. And since it burns down, basically it doesn't matter which one you made, this is what it would burn down to. Which honestly explains why William was in the recharge station. Okay, they didn't actually have to move his body. Which actually, it makes sense. Finally, something in this godforsaken series makes sense. Something makes sense in a FNAF game, praise the Lord. But this also means that he hasn't been taken to the hospital yet for the man in room 1280 to occur. This idea that this is the FNAF 6 pizzeria also ends up solidifying when you see that the blob is like the new Ennard, with all of the different animatronics from FNAF 6 present when you actually like take a look closer and even like clip inside of it. There's a video for it. Many people have done this on YouTube, but you can like see the Scrap Baby mask, you can see the Puppet's mask. Yeah, combine this with, you know, the fact that Springtrap is here, or I guess Burntrap or Scraptrap, whatever, okay? The fact that William in some form of animatronic Golden Bunny is here, and you get an explanation for what happened after the FNAF 6 fire.
And at 4, dangerous. In 1993, the most dangerous profession in the United States was actually night security guard. This seems to just be a funny nod at how many people die in the Fazbear restaurants, because the actual most dangerous profession from 1993 in the US was, at least based on number of deaths per 100k employed, was fishers. But based on just sheer amount of deaths, it was operators, fabricators, and laborers, with nearly 2,000 deaths. So if night security guard was actually the most dangerous job, more than 1,959 security guards would have needed to die in the FNAF universe, which is incredible to say the least. However, if we're going off the number of deaths per 100,000 employed, over 159 security guards would have needed to die, which is a much more reasonable yet still shocking number. This is also not including the fact that the president is technically the deadliest job in the US, since a high number have been assassinated. That's just an even higher percentage, but we don't talk about that. Halfway through, in at number 3, limb transplant. William Afton is a tricky fiend. He somehow, no matter what, seems to get away with whatever scheme he's cracked up just because he's lucky, okay? Or maybe he's just that kind of person. Maybe he has like the Infinity Gauntlet, maybe he's just charming, I don't know. But if he does have the Infinity Gauntlet, it would explain a lot, since every game after the introduction of Springtrap, at least where William appears, he has a new design. And it's not a design that can be easily explained away by the suit deteriorating or being torn up, no. Like Springtrap to Scraptrap, his head's like doubled in size. And then Scraptrap to Burntrap, it went back to the original design. It was more Springtrap but more deteriorated and burnt. Like the whole time, however, it remained William Afton, as proven in Ultimate Custom Night and in like the Freddy files. It calls him William Afton as well. So like, what's the deal here? Scotty boy, what's going on? How did this happen? My best explanation was artistic license, okay? Scott just ran with the idea that he thought he would make Springtrap scarier, since a lot of people were upset with the original jump scare from FNAF 3, and he didn't want that repeating itself, but in the process, he confused the hell out of us, and honestly, I don't like Scraptrap, it's weird. So in Security Breach, he went back to something closer to the original design, and then swapped out missing limbs from the Scraptrap animatronic for Glamrock Bonnie parts. Plus, the whole artistic license thing explains away the design discrepancies on Scraptrap. And ultimately, in at number 2, Cupcake. Chica's Cupcake features a unique set of servos and its own independent suite of software. This is the fast fact that was the foundation of my explanation as to where a Shadow Chica would have gone. The fact that the Cupcake is its own separate animatronic means that it could be possessed separate to Chica. So if there was ever a reason for Shadow Chica, or if the Shadow animatronics are spirits that somehow got kicked out of their animatronics, Chica's shadow could have just been hiding in the Cupcake. But the Cupcake being their own animatronic is also something we've already known, since in FNAF VR's parts and service minigame, you see the Cupcake jump off its plate and run around before you can catch it and put it back on the plate. The Cupcake also got its own jump scare in FNAF 4, but that could have also just been Chica like holding it up or like throwing it at you, but I doubt it at this point. Finally, in at number 1, I wanna be a rock star. Man, Bonnie's playing Nickelback. Rockstar Bonnie was developed from the original Bonnie for use in Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria's franchise operations. This is something that is highly interesting, but not really of big consequence. The fact that Rockstar Bonnie is a development of original Bonnie indicates that maybe the original animatronics weren't melted down in the games. Sure, Candy Cadet speaks of 5 things becoming one thing, but maybe that wasn't referring to the fun times at all, since in the books, the fun times were created by melting down the endoskeletons of the original 5 animatronics to make Remnant, which is the molten soul metal, but all the metals mixed together into one horrific mess, hence why they had to come together into Ennard. Also, we also got a confirmation that the Fun Times were the first animatronics that William made, so he wouldn't have made the other ones first, therefore they wouldn't be possessed, at least in the game world. So if the Rockstar animatronics are the original animatronics just refurbished, maybe this isn't the case, and the FNAF 3 ending was accurate with the souls being put to rest, which would mean that Golden Freddy is at rest, meaning that the one you should not have killed couldn't be Cassidy. At least that's how it seems to me. But this could also be a misinterpretation, and they just meant that it was designed to be like the original Bonnie instead of using the same parts. It's not specific enough, but it does actually sound like they are meant to be the same parts, or at least the endoskeleton is the same. And again, with the Fun Times being first, that means that like they couldn't be possessed by the original 5. I mean, That's how it's looking at this point, at least until Lumix says that these aren't canon, if they end up saying that they aren't canon. In a tent, spring-locked Cassidy. Cassidy is the most mysterious victim in the missing children's incident. Her name was hidden for years, only being revealed in the survival logbook and then confirmed in one of the FNAF movie scripts that Scott tossed out the window in a post on Reddit. But honestly, we don't really know much about her. We don't know how she died, and there are plenty of theories that claim to have evidence of her being a springlock victim. Maybe William knew that it would be easier that way. I mean, after all, she does go on to possess Golden Freddy, and we figured that he could be a springlock suit that had the guts removed, hence the slumped over nature in his FNAF 1 form. However, if this was the case and Cassidy's body was in that suit, wouldn't they have found it when they were gutting the animatronic? I mean, maybe William was the one who gutted it, considering how he was the suit technician, but for a suit technician, he also missed the fatal flaw with the animatronics that he literally designed, since he got in the suit while it was wet. Either way, Cassidy could have been spring-locked, and it would kind of make sense. At least, until Scott acknowledges it, though, it's just an idea. Maybe a theory, though. Get it? In at 9, Michael sucks. Okay, I get that people think that Michael is the good guy of the series. It certainly seems like he is playing the hero, okay? He's going after his father, trying to make up for his sins, kind of like Oliver Queen style. But really, Michael honestly just seems like he's faking it this whole time and not actually really doing anything. Like, sure, he says that he's going to like right his father's wrongs and come after him and whatnot, but like looking at him, he's not doing it because he's a good person, okay? He's doing it because he feels bad and not because of like some actual higher purpose. He blames himself for getting his brother killed, which subsequently means that anything that he tries to do good is only to make himself feel better about his mistakes. Because in the end, there's nothing that's gonna bring his bro back. Well, I mean, aside from turning him into a robot. But William has that covered, okay? He doesn't even really actually have the stomach to really end his father when given the chance. He says that he's gonna come find him at the end of Sister Location, but when he finds him in FNAF 6, he's not the one to burn the place down to stop him. Henry's the one who does that. Hey, Henry is the only one actually willing to stop William, and that just shows how serious Michael is about this. Like, yeah, Henry lost a kid, but Michael lost a brother, okay? If he really wanted to make sure that William was stopped, he also just wouldn't have let himself burn in the FNAF 6 fire, just to be sure that his father was down for the count, okay? But instead, he lets himself die so that he won't have to regret hurting his brother anymore, because he has the curse of knowledge, and knowledge is a curse, okay? Ignorance is bliss. You can quote me on that. And it ruined Afton. This is a bit of a wild one, but hear me out. I've mentioned previously how multiple security breach kids look like Afton kids. Gregory is very clearly meant to at least be an allegory for Crying Child. You know, the stripes on the shirt, the age, the relationship with Freddy. I mean, it's right there in our faces, okay? Whether you believe that Crying Child's a robot or not, he's at least meant to represent Crying Child. And now, look at the new Girl from the Ruins poster, okay? While she may be in black and white, she is very clearly blonde, okay? She also has pigtails like Baby does. And we know that Elizabeth is possessing Baby, okay? She's wearing a skirt exactly like Elizabeth was wearing the first time that we see her in Sister Location, and I mean, if Crying Child's 2 stripes are enough for a comparison, I think that, you know, a whole outfit is more than enough. And then, look at her shoes, too, okay? The lights are the only thing that actually has color on them, on the character herself, which is very clearly meant to get our attention. And then, those lights are purple and red. Purple, very clearly meant to represent Aftons in general, because you know, purple. And while previously I said that the red might have been Vanny, Baby is covered in red, head to toe. From her clothes to her hair, red is all over that animatronic. Or maybe it could just be that this girl is evil, like how Elizabeth always somehow wants to impress her father for some reason, even though he's the reason she's dead. I'm just saying, okay? It's not the craziest thing that this series would have ever done, alright? They literally brought Afton back as sentient code and then put him back in his own body after he was possessing someone, and then also kept them being possessed, alright? It's not out of the realm of possibility. And at 7, First Location. The first location of the Freddy's franchise was actually Fredbear's Family Diner. This was also something that was merely an assumption until this point, but for a while we considered the Fredbear's Family Diner to be the first location, so at least we get some more timeline confirmations there. It's interesting though that Scott chose to confirm this particular location instead of something else that could have had more significance, which leads me to assume that there might be more to Fredbear's Family Diner than we first imagined, and that there might be more to take a look at here. The diner makes an appearance in FNAF 2 and 3 according to the wiki, although it appears that the Take Cake minigame does happen at the the FNAF 2 location thanks to the security puppet minigame from FNAF 6. So maybe we should be taking a closer and more intense look at the FNAF 3 minigames to see if there's anything else we can find. And at 6, sister wife suits. I love that I named this number this. One theory that I've seen plenty of times and that I'm sure was mostly like the start of FNAF 4 was that Golden Freddy and Fredbear are actually the same animatronic, suggesting that the reason Golden Freddy is all limp in the original FNAF and FNAF 2 are because of his endoskeleton being removed after Crying Child's bite in 1983, and that's why the suit has to teleport around and cause hallucinations because it can't actually move. This would also probably mean that Crying Child was the one in the Golden Freddy suit instead of Cassidy. However, this also might not be true based on Golden Freddy and Fredbear being separate characters in Ultimate Custom Night, but also one of them's a nightmare version, so I don't really know if that counts. But also, just like the coloring and the size, Golden Freddy is much smaller than Fredbear would have been, and would have had to be, since, you know, Fredbear would have to accommodate a human plus robot parts on the side, and Golden Freddy wouldn't have to necessarily, since he would just be an animatronic and not a springlock suit. And at 5, the Aftons. Yes, this is a top 5, okay, relax. In the best ending to FNAF Security Breach, there are quite a few confusing moments. The most confusing one for me, at the very least, is the idea that Gregory would go get ice cream with Vanessa when she's done trying to kill him. Like, why would you do that? Like, this is kind of like a come into my van kind of situation, you know? Some seem to think that it's because they're related or representing the dead Afton kids. And thanks to MatPat, there is actually a little more evidence to this now. Well, not now, like a while ago, but you know what I mean. The ice cream that Vanessa gets while on the hill is very reminiscent of the ice cream cone that lured Elizabeth into Baby's arms. However you want to say it, arms, arm grabbing, scooping range, whatever. The cone, the soft serve on top, kind of looks like the cone with the soft serve on top that Baby presented to Elizabeth in order to lure her closer and then, you know. Like, is that evidence or just a coincidence? Originally, you don't really know, okay? But Vanessa isn't the only one with a potentially symbolic dessert option in her murderous little hands. Thanks to MatPat pointing this out, Gregory also has a popsicle. A Freddy popsicle to be exact. They're kind of like the ones that you could get in the game earlier, like the SpongeBob ones that never look right? But it's Freddy Fazbear. And the lighting makes this one, that isn't Glamrock Freddy, surprisingly enough, look very yellow in color, as if it was referencing to a certain yellow bear that could have had something to do with Crying Child's death. If it was meant to be Crying Child, this could be a good way of indicating that not only is this good, but it also gets better. Alright, Crying Child has taken a bite out of the head of the popsicle, which first of all is weird, because why are you biting a popsicle? Especially in a point that like the ear can like fall off because it's not attached by enough anymore. But also it could be a reference to how he ended up meeting his unfortunate fate after William supercharged the jaw, just saying, but like, I don't know, okay? I don't know if like the generally accepted canon, like if these are the Afton kids, but like hell, it would make a lot of sense in my mind. In at 4, finally dead. The true ending for FNAF Security Breach is seemingly one of the most interesting parts of the game because it contains a load of little things to watch out for. After making your way into Burntrap's area, Freddy will be taken over by Afton's newest form, and it's up to Gregory to defeat him by using 3 monitors and buttons to burn him, which again is a whole other can of worms that I've talked about in a recent video. Players will need to avoid the animatronic enemies that Burntrap sends after us somehow. Don't know how they got down here and don't know how Monty ended up getting into the vent when he doesn't have any legs. But they come for Gregory and you can use the doors to lock him out and then you gotta scare Roxy away and whatnot. But when Burntrap is burned more, the blob, which was the tentacle monster thing, again, a whole other can of worms, ironically, will attack him, making sure that he doesn't get free, hopefully. Freddy and Gregory will then be shown escaping and then sitting on a hill together after not recharging for an hour, which means that he should be dead. However, if the blob actually does kill William is a totally different question. There are death animations in the game file supposedly, however they aren't used in the ending, so we can't really consider them canon. Plus, the whole I always come back thing should have ended with this game, from what we understood about the series, but he came back again, so even logical conclusions aren't going to help us. So, yeah, for the love of God, please let William finally be dead. Please. For my sake.
Getting close to the end and in number 3, spirits. One of the major issues with FNAF for some is the inconsistency of the whole spirits are real, but they aren't the ones doing the actual possession thing. Since in FNAF 3's minigames, we see the physical spirits of the original 5 missing children, and then in Fazbear Fright, we learn that agony and emotions are what actually cause possession in this world. So how could there be those actual physical spirits if it was just their emotions causing the suits to move. And while originally we might have just chalked it up to maybe there being other emotions or even just like William hallucinating, with Security Breach and specifically the rooftop ending, I think we have a better idea. Since in the rooftop ending we end up seeing Vanny dead on the ground and then we unmask her and it reveals Vanessa. And then a couple seconds later we see Vanessa looking down at her body on top of the building, just watching herself. Yeah, that's definitely not a problem at all. Thanks, Scott. This could mean, though, that there are only spirits when the person regrets what they've done. Since the kids in the original suits terrorized so many others, maybe they ended up actually feeling bad about it, even though they couldn't really control it because it was their emotions controlling the suits. But maybe they still felt bad about what was going on, and then that's why they had spirits. Regret. It's a powerful thing.
But ultimately, into number 2, the truth about Remnant. Currently, what we know about Remnant and Agony tells us that to destroy it properly, we need to burn it, hence why there are so many damn fires in this series. FNAF 3, 6, and 9 all end with something or someone getting burnt. FNAF 3's fire was all about dealing with Springtrap, FNAF 6 was about putting everyone who knew about the atrocities that occurred at Freddy's to rest, and then in FNAF 9 we burned Burntrap multiple times to get him to stop possessing Freddy. And this is all because Henry learned that the only way to destroy Remnant and put these things to rest was through fire. But how is it that really we deal with all of these animatronics and people? Like, because like all 3 of the FNAF fires haven't really worked. We've been told that fire is the only thing hot enough to burn off Remnant, but we've also seen it described as being a liquid metal. If the soul-infused metal can be a liquid, then how is it possible to burn off the soul part? That's not how it works if something can be molten. So in essence, every single animatronic who was supposedly set free by a cleansing fire wasn't actually set free because of a fire, which leads me to believe that we actually have false information and that Dr. Talbert lied to us. But I mean, he wouldn't do that, right? He's researching things to get his little girl back, right? Well, this is where this theory actually happens. I don't think Dr. Talbert is a real person. Or rather, I guess he is a real person, but that's not actually his name. Think about it. Who else do we know that has an endless flow of Remnant from an undisclosed source and a close personal friend working against him? William Afton, yeah, that's right, who made up the whole Remnant thing needs to be burned so that he can't be killed, really, because, come on. That's why. And finally, into number 1, false conviction. On this channel's previous full FNAF timeline video, I think the most recent one, since we haven't really talked about anything after Security Breach, YouTube user Shauna S commented saying, quote, "Quick little theory. You know how in the first game it says the killer was convicted for the murders of the missing children? If that's the case, I think that Henry was falsely convicted. But since they couldn't find the bodies, he got 25 to 30 years and then got let out of prison when Fazbear Frights happened. It explains to me why he wasn't involved in the first few games. I will say I've heard a lot of different information concerning the missing children's incident, so my theory could be wrong, just wanted to put it out there. And then they gave me permission to use it in videos. So honestly, Henry being falsely imprisoned for the missing children's incident does explain a lot. Considering how there were no bodies though, there wouldn't be much forensic evidence, so the case would rely on circumstantial evidence to get a conviction. But when it's the death of multiple kids, they definitely want to explore every avenue, so the case could have dragged on for a while, until 1993 when the Fazbear Frights location closed, with William inside. 30 years is a lot of time for new evidence to come to light, and maybe Henry got let out earlier than that, but didn't act until William was free, since he was trapped in a building. While the whole he was convicted thing could be explained away by Scott not thinking there would be another game, let alone 8 more, maybe he just wanted to see the story of the killer ended. This could be a great explanation for things and explain why nothing happens until FNAF 3, so good job. The worst ending. The worst ending is actually the second one I got, with the face request ending being the first. But this ending is just if you leave the Pizzaplex at 6 AM through the front doors. However, this is labeled as the worst ending for very good reason, since after escaping, Gregory obviously runs away from the Pizzaplex, but he doesn't seem to go to any house. Instead, he finds a cardboard box in an alleyway and uses newspaper talking about the children who've gone missing at the Pizzaplex as a blanket, with a silhouette of what looks a lot like him in the bottom left corner, might I add. But it doesn't seem to matter though, since a red light comes on and we see Vanny's shadow appear in front of us. She finally ended up up getting us. Now, this actually has a little bit to unpack, because firstly, if Gregory has a home, why didn't he run back there? I mean, like, yeah, it's later and he's been up for a while, but even if I was stuck in a pizzeria for 6 hours and almost died multiple times and was finally able to escape, I don't care if my house is on the other side of the planet, okay? I'm booking it as far as I possibly can. The fact that he hides in a box and then uses a newspaper as a blanket to sleep. Also, he uses that absolutely horribly, might I add. Like, bro, just turn it 90 degrees and you'd actually have a decent blanket. It would cover your body. And like, maybe Vanny wouldn't have found you that way. Like, I know that it was for readability in the ending, but whatever, okay? I don't care. Him hiding in a cardboard box, though, seems very similar to how I thought of homelessness as a child. Just like, grab a box and use it as your shelter. It's also how cartoons seem to depict it a lot. This leads me to believe that he has no home, only adding to the confusion and mystery of his character. Like, how the ever-loving hell does that work? Like, even if he is an orphan, he would have been taken to an orphanage. I don't know how many kids actually run away from orphanages, cause like, it's either that or this. So, I don't know, it makes who he is even more of a mystery, since we know nothing about him other than he probably went to the pizzeria to try and find the missing kids, since he's using it as a blanket. Next up, the good ending. The good ending is probably the least lore heavy of all the endings, which makes it a simple explanation. With a level 7 security pass, or I guess 7 level 1 passes, since we collect a new one every time and don't really get a better one, maybe. If you go to the loading dock, which is next to the trash compactor that you would have found if you went to the bottom of the map instead of through L chips when first entering the atrium to leave, there was a door that previously couldn't open. But this time, Gregory and Freddy will escape in a van, as long as you have level 7 security. Gregory will be driving the van, but Freddy will eventually run out of power. However, Gregory will actually solve this power issue by loading up Freddy with the charge from the car's battery using jumper cables. Now, how Gregory, a 6 or 10 or whatever year old kid, has any idea of how not only to connect the jumper cables properly to the battery, then connect them to Freddy is one thing, okay? Like, maybe he's like a kid who really likes cars. But this still adds more confusion, cause like, how does this little kid know so goddamn much? If he's around 6 like I've been thinking since the start of the game, cause like he can fit in strollers and is so short that he can't drive the go-karts on his own, there has to be something more going on here than him just being a gearhead. Like, how can he fit in a stroller but also reach the pedals for the frickin' van, dude? What? Next, Princess Quest. This is probably my favorite ending in the whole game because it's something that I was cluing into before I read anything about the other endings to the game, which I only did once I actually beat it because I wanted to make videos like this. Princess Quest ending has to be set up for a decent amount of time before you actually finish the game, since the player needs to locate and beat all 3 Princess Quest arcade machines. The third one is in Vanny's room above Phaser Blast. The second is where you find Music Man Spider, or DJ Music Man for those who aren't cool like I am. And the final is in Roxy's Raceway, in like the beauty salon thing, which I didn't actually check because I didn't think that that would be a thing. Now, you have to beat Phaser Quest to be able to get this ending because you need to discover the room that has the third game in it. So you need to find Vanny's room, and this is what triggers the Phaser Quest ending. And as I was thinking, you need to beat the first game, and then beat the second game, and then choose the Vanny ending and play the third one. This will result in the player actually saving Vanessa, and thus finding Vanny's mask on the floor. How did that save Vanessa, you ask? Like, all we did was beat arcade games? Well, it's actually fairly simple. Help Wanted. If you've seen any of the videos where I discuss the endings of Help Wanted and then how we complete the puzzle and like the final battle and we get locked behind the door, you'll know that I said that us doing that puzzle thing was just to distract us so that William had more of an opportunity to shut us away in our own mind. And seemingly he does that. And Princess Quest actually proves me right, since at the end of Princess Quest 3 you open a giant door with a large keyhole surrounded by glitching cracks. And in Help Wanted, we get sealed behind a door with a large keyhole along with cracks and handprints. This with the obvious connection via Princess Quest to Help Wanted because it was ported into the flat mobile port of the game because they couldn't actually include Glitch Trap due to size limitations because you know it's a phone game. So us opening that door is releasing the player from Help Wanted, who now is confirmed to be Vanessa, from the wall that Afton set up. Since after this door opens, we see her mask on the floor and even sit on a hill with Vanessa and Freddy's head in the final shot of that ending, which is similar to the final shot thought of the canon ending. This is truly the best ending, but it's unfortunately not the canon one. Next up, Phaser Quest. While having this ending unlocked is required for the Princess Quest ending, that's because you need to access the Princess Quest minigame. But without playing the other two, you can't play the third. So this ending actually ends up killing Vanny. Since without the game, you have to make your way up to her room and hit the button that turns the animatronics against her. And since she has just had them disassemble Freddy, we as Gregory tell the animatronics to disassemble her, which results in the first killing to be committed by an actual kid in this game series, because they literally tear her to shreds. We don't see her corpse, which leads me to think that maybe it would have been too gory, or because it would have been revealed that Vanny was an animatronic, but I don't think that it would have been the latter. I think that it just would have been too gory, because like Freddy is absolutely destroyed when you see that. That would have been not pretty. But more on that other idea later, because there's another ending that indicates that there's more going on here than you realize. Get it? Because that's what Vanny says in the trailer. Next, the Springtrap ending. The Springtrap ending, or the canon ending, or true ending, whatever you want to call it, is unlocked, as I figured it was going to be, by finding the secret elevator and the secret section in Roxy's Raceway. It's down the stairs next to where you find the test driver head. Instead of actually getting the head, you just go to the left and go down the stairs. This requires your Freddy to have the Monty Claws, however, so this is potentially unlockable right after installing them, since that's when you're given the mission to go to Roxy's Raceway. You can also do this if you choose to stay after completing the game, however that will result in you having to deal with Monty's boss battle in one go without saving, since save states are disabled after you could have escaped, so it's less likely that that's gonna happen. After making your way into Burntrap's area though, Freddy will be taken over by Springtrap using code, or at least he starts to try to take over him, and it's up to Gregory to defeat him by using 3 monitors, and you gotta press the buttons to burn him. The player will also need to avoid the animatronic enemies that are coming for Gregory and use the doors to temporarily lock them out. When Springtrap is finally burned though, the blob, which was the tentacle monster from the very first Freddy and Friends cartoon, will attack him, making sure that he doesn't get free. Freddy and Gregory will be shown escaping and sitting on a hill together, and I think my original theory about this was right. This tentacle monster was never revealed or never had anything else that had to do with them, but after this game, the final Fazbear Frights book would have originally released, so it would have been after this, but due to delays, the game came out after the final books were released that showed us what the tentacle monster would have been about, and it's how it's in fact Baby, or I guess Elizabeth Afton, who stopped her father but probably will be the one controlling Vanny now, since in the canon ending, Vanny doesn't actually die, and I think that that's worth noting. And finally, the rooftop ending. The rooftop ending is unlocked by exiting the Pizzaplex through the prize counter and clicking leave. This will prompt Freddy to burn the place to the ground, and for the two of you to escape onto the roof. I don't know what Freddy's original plan was, because like I don't think he would fit on the fire escape. Maybe he would just jump down and then you'd take the fire escape. But when Gregory gets to the roof, Vanny is seemingly there waiting for us, somehow. She grabs us, but Freddy, with his new eyes, actually sees Vanny now and jumps with her off of the roof, causing them both to fall. They both seemingly die, or I guess Vanny dies and Freddy is just inoperational, and we take off Vanny's mask, revealing Vanessa behind it. We look confused and the comic ends. However, before actually ending and showing us the final news clipping, another couple panels are shown, with Vanessa standing up on the rooftop looking down at what just happened. This is probably one of the most confusing endings, since it shows us that there are apparently 2 Vanessas, and while we seemingly knew about the whole like double life thing, we hadn't exactly seen the 2 characters in the same room again, so we thought that there was only one of them. And in the Princess Quest ending, we seemingly save Vanny, so what the hell is going on here? The simplest answer has us sounding like a middle school English teacher, with symbolism being always an option in this series. And with Scott, I think that this is probably the right place to talk symbolism, because it's FNAF. Unlike Shakespeare though, he didn't mean anything. Now, this is probably not actually 2 Vanessas. It could just simply be Vanessa's soul looking down at her body. We know that souls are actually a thing in this universe thanks to FNAF 3's cutscenes where Purple Guy gets spring-trapped. Those souls had physical forms that caused him to freak out. This could just be Vanessa regretting all the things she did as Vanny, even if it was unwilling. This could also just be more than that as well, where there could legitimately be two different Vanessas, with one either being a robot or from another universe, since we have the whole Fazbear fanverse initiative, and the multiple endings indicates that there are multiple universes already, or they could just be twins, but I think it would be more cool if Vanny is a robot. Like, I hated this theory in the early days, mostly because people were treating it as fact. However, in the previously discussed canon or Springtrap ending, we did have to fight off Springtrap, but we have to do it as Gregory since, like I said, he takes control over Freddy. But why didn't he take control over us? This man, more than anyone, should know that you always gotta get rid of the kids, because they're always gonna be the ones to screw you. So like, why didn't he just like take control of Freddy and like keep us inside, or take control of both of us if he could? I mean, he had Roxy under his control in that same scene, right? So we know that he can control multiple things, and I think it's probably because no matter what, he can only possess robotic beings. Combine this seemingly obvious limit with the fact that Vanny doesn't start bleeding after hitting the ground, and you have some solid evidence, but I'm sure that it was just her soul looking back at what she did. Fire surrounding her so that she actually makes sure she dies. Because, you know, Remnant can only be killed by fire.